Right. Awesome to be here. I've spoken to you guys at night before, but I've never been in here. So, um, yeah, cool setup. I like it. All right. So my name's Steven. I go to church here, married, got 3 kids, and love it here. Love Rocky and Ben, the adults that help you guys. With small groups. It's awesome stuff. I think something you may know this. You may know this because it's been said before. You may know this from like working, and hanging out with the adults here. But I think it's important to know in the back of your head or at the front of your head, wherever, that all of us adults, older people, whatever, like we have challenges too. We're humans like you. We're a little older. We've seen some more stuff, but we have challenges. We have uncertainties. We have things we're not comfortable with. Life's hard. Life's not always easy. It's not supposed to be. I don't think, hopefully you don't have some impression that, man, life is harder than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be easier. Life's tough sometimes, maybe a lot of times. And there's a lot of good things too. But um, all of us, young to old, are just trying to be as faithful as we can and take the next steps to continue to be faithful. It brings up a point, though. None of us really know how faithful we are. It's not like when you say a prayer, you get some spiritual vision where the Holy Spirit comes to you and is like, hey, last year you were at level 62 and this year you're at 68. So good job. You don't get that kind of grade, and none of us really know how faithful we are. It's same for us older folks in here. Same for the preachers and the elders at this church. Same for the big time preachers you may listen to in a podcast, or that you like the bands that we just listen to. Like no one knows how faithful. No one knows how faithful they are. I think it's interesting too, because I'm about to talk on the last couple lines of the Lord's Prayer. But before getting to that, I want to go back to the very beginning of it, which Jesus says this before he says, here's what you can pray. He says, your Father already knows what you need before you ask him. So, this prayer is not about saying the right magical words. It's about, well, we're going to get into that, but you don't have to say the exact right thing because God already knows what we need, all of us. And all of us need different specific things. We need some of the same basic things, but all of us need different things. And God, the Father, cares for you and is caring for all those specific things in your life. Which brings up to me, if God already knows what we need before we ask him, then the real question and the challenging question for us is, what do you think you need? If you had like a chart, a line down the middle, this side is what God thinks we need, this side is what we think we need, how similar are those things? Because God truly knows what we need. And this prayer, in total, this prayer is to help get our minds and our hearts kind of tilting towards what God says we need. Because we would like our own will to be done. We would like our own kingdom to be happening. We want more than daily bread. We want a lot of bread. We want more stuff. We want forgiveness, but sometimes it's hard to forgive other people. So if the Father knows what you need and he cares for what you need, then the challenge is, for me, Stephen, do I think that I need this? And am I willing to change to receive that? Now that's the beginning of the prayer, or right before the prayer starts. Now we come to the last couple lines. Lead us not into temptation or testing. Some versions say different things. I don't know Greek. I have heard that the Greek, like originally, is testing, not temptation. I don't know which one it is. We're going to talk about both tonight just to cover them both so you don't have to decide. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Jesus says to pray this: lead us not into temptation or testing, but deliver us from evil. Which the Father knows what we need. So he's probably not going to be trying to tempt us, right? Like God's not going to be trying to trip us up. I think it's interesting to think about the difference in temptation and testing in our life and in the Bible, because this happens at different stories in the Bible, and I think it's helpful to understand those stories better. I think also it will help you understand your life better. Temptation, again, it's different than testing. Temptation is often short-term, and it's to get a negative result. So you might struggle with the same temptation again and again, but a lot of temptation is, I don't have something now, and I want to get it now. And if you get it now, that's probably going to be a negative thing. If you don't get it now, it feels like a negative thing. I guess that's one of the hard parts about temptation. But ultimately, temptation, it's to get something now that you're not supposed to have. And if you got it now, it would be a negative thing. So I associate temptation with kind of negativity, okay? Drag you down sort of thing. The difference, testing. Testing is something that happens over the long term, and it's about getting a positive result, or at least lead to a positive result. So I think about Satan, the accuser, would be kind of the more accurate name of Satan, or slanderer, someone who is out to get you, someone who is a negative force in your life. Satan is tempting us, and God is testing us. Think about your teacher. Okay, let's use an example. Practical, okay? You've got a test, let's say on Thursday. You got a test. Why is the teacher giving you a test? The test is to show you what you know, maybe what you don't know. It's to help you learn it. And it's for the teacher to see what he or she has taught you, and if you've learned it, and then if we need to spend more time on that material. So a test on Thursday, what do? You spend time, maybe it's a hard test, so you spend some time tonight, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, trying to study a little bit or a lot to be ready for this big test. Now, let's say Monday night, you've finished dinner, you've got a couple hours of free time, you got to study for this test, and you get on your phone and you start scrolling. Or, hey, I want to watch this show that I want to get caught up on. The screen is tempting you, right? Dragging you down, drawing your attention away from what's supposed to happen. So there's really nothing good to come from the screen in this case. That's tempting you. But the teacher is testing you, and that's a positive thing. Now, if you study a lot, fail the test, and you're like, man, I studied a lot, I learned a lot, but I didn't know it as well as I should have. Well, if you studied a whole lot and didn't do well, that's kind of okay. And if you didn't study and therefore didn't do well because you were tempted, that's kind of not okay. So I think they're very different things. Satan is tempting you and God is testing you. And the way it works in life is God tests us to see how faithful we are. Go back to that original line or one of those early slides. None of us know how faithful we are. Testing helps us all to see that. Testing in our life helps us to see how faithful we are. Okay, let me read. There's a couple verses in James that I think are helpful for this. This is in the book of James, chapter 1. This is the brother of Jesus. James says this. This is starting in verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, having stood the test. That person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed by it. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. You see how James is drawing like a very strong, bold line between testing and temptation. Okay? So, in testing, God is trying to lift us up. In tempting, Satan is trying to drag us down. Again, long-term good, short-term negative. I think testing is an interesting thing, and it seems like, maybe there's this thought, like, God testing me. I thought God was working for me, like I thought God loved me. I thought he supported me. Jesus says the Father knows what I need. Well, this gets back to that question early on. The Father knows we need testing. Do we think we need it? And the prayer of Jesus is to say, when temptation comes, when testing comes, whatever comes, God, help lead me through that. If it's a negative attack or a test that's really difficult, help me with this. It's hard either way. Help me with this. That's the prayer. That's the prayer. Now, it's really interesting little example. There was a band in the 1980s called Van Halen. Okay? Someone, yeah, we got some Van Halen fans back here. Okay, huge band in the 1980s. I don't know Van Halen that well. I was born in 1989, so I was 0 years old as they were rocking out. But Van Halen was a big band, and they went on a huge tour, bigger than almost any other bands had gone on. They were saying most bands took 3 or 4 big trucks to wherever their tour was, wherever they were going to do a show. This tour that Van Halen was doing, they would take 15 semis full of stuff to set up their show. So they're doing something 5 times bigger than all the other big guys, okay? Also, they were going to a lot of cities that big shows didn't happen in. So not just Atlanta, not just New York, not just Chicago, some of the big cities that are still relatively small for a big concert. So they said, this had not been done before. These smaller cities were not used to shows hardly at all, especially a big show. They were kind of breaking new ground as far as concerts go. And so they would send out the contract because local companies with their crews of people will have to set up the shows. And so you're a local company saying, yeah, we'll sign the contract to set up the concert venue and make sure everything's working, the lights, the sound, the stage, all the stuff that goes on with a concert. Well, you sign the contract, I will do this for this amount. There's something that comes with a contract called a rider, R-I-D-E-R, a rider. In the rider is all of the things that you've got to do to make the show work. Well, again, this is a big show. They had pages and pages and pages of things in the rider that the setup crew had to do. One of those things, which was article like 126 or something, it was in the middle of the packet, not at the end, okay? Item 126 of all the things they had to do after that too. 126 said, we want a jar of M&Ms backstage, but make sure that there are no brown M&Ms in the jar. Now, you may know this, but in case you don't, big music people, same with actors and actresses, a lot of big big athletes are this way too. They're weird. They got weird little things. They call the guy for help with the book, and the guy says, I want the limo at 71 degrees. Remember this? Not 72, not 71, 71 degrees. I mean, that's how arrogant people are. And again, most of these people are arrogant. So you may look at this and say, Van Halen, big band, record-sized tour. What an arrogant thing to say no brown M&Ms in the jar, which is what people thought for a long time. But then it came out in an interview, one of the leaders of Van Halen was asked about this jar of M&Ms. Why no brown M&Ms? And he said, we could very quickly look at the jar, and if there were brown M&Ms in the jar, it told us that they had not read the rest of the rider, the rest of the document. And because this was a big show, the show would get messed up. People wouldn't they paid a lot of money to come to the show. If the show messes up, you want to get good value for what you spend. And safety was a concern. This was a big production. It was really complex. If things were wrong, people could get hurt. And he said, if there were brown jars or brown M&Ms in that jar, I knew that they did not do or read the whole document. And that meant that we had to get everybody together and say, you have to go through this whole thing, this whole setup with this big document, again, line by line. The M&Ms were a test, right? They're not trying to get them to mess up. They're trying to figure out, is the setup crew doing a good job? Now, with that in mind, let's read Deuteronomy chapter 8. First few verses, Deuteronomy chapter 8. Moses says this to the people. Of course, he's speaking on behalf of God. Be careful to follow every command, not just some of them, not just the ones you like, not just the ones at the front. Follow every command I am giving you today, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the promised land that the Lord has promised on oath to your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years. He did it to humble you, to test you, in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then he fed you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach them that man does not live on bread alone, but by every word. Again, not some of the words, not your favorite words, not the one at the beginning. No, that man should live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothes did not wear out, your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. God is tested his people. He even had them hunger in the desert. It's not a comfortable place. It's not like the weather out here. Like it's hot in the desert and they're getting hungry. God did it to test them, to know if they would listen to his words. It was a test. And so, again, God knows we need this. So, again, we pray, God, when you test us, help us with this. Help us with the tests that you give us. and give us tests that maybe we can actually pass. And if we don't pass them, help us to learn from them. God tests us to help us become who He wants us to be, to know how faithful we are. There's another example in the Bible. You may know this one, Job. Remember this guy? He's a great like the story starts off. Job is awesome. Like that's basically what it says. Job is awesome. He's blameless. He's upright. He never messes up. He's a great guy. And so then the next scene is God in heaven, different people, the angels are coming up to him, and one of those people that comes up is Satan, the accuser. And God's like, "What you been up to?" And he's like, "I'm just roaming around." God says, "Have you thought about Job? Have you seen him?" And Satan says, "Yes. It's because you protect him. It's not really fair that he's so good. And you say he's good, but he's not that good," because Satan's basically saying he has not been tested. He has not been tempted. That's what Satan's saying. This is all in Job chapter 1. I'm paraphrasing it. It's not word for word. But Satan is saying he's got it easy. And God says, "Okay, I will allow you to test him. Just don't harm him." So, crazy section of events like armies come, attack him, take away his wealth. Meteors from Earth come. His children die. I mean, really, really sad stuff and almost laughable the way it goes. Boom, boom, boom. And Job stays faithful. So at the beginning of the book, the text says, this third-party narrator, Job is good. And then all the hard stuff happens. The testing comes. And we see, okay, he really is good. Okay, chapter 2. God's in heaven. The courts of angels are coming up to him, and one of them again is Satan. God says, "Well, have you thought about Job? He's pretty good." Satan says, "Yeah, but you didn't even let me touch him. You didn't let me harm him." God says, "Okay, go ahead. Have at him, but don't kill him." Okay, well, Satan strikes him with boils. His friends couldn't even recognize him. His whole body's messed up. He's in total pain and discomfort 24/7. Again, his friends did not recognize him. So again, the testing gets worse. This is how life sometimes happens. Testing gets worse before it gets better. Okay, all of this, again, to be clear, is testing. The tempting comes when Job's wife says, "Why don't you curse God and die already?" That's tempting, because that's trying to get him to do something negative. That's different. Do you see that? That's trying to get him to do something negative. But the testing is to reveal that he really is faithful. That he really is faithful. In the end, by the way, he is delivered from evil, just like the prayer says. He is delivered from evil, and God blesses him even more than when he started. Okay, to wrap it up, the Father knows what we need. And sometimes what we think we need is not the same. So the testing shows us that we need God. Remember in Deuteronomy, God said that you live by every word. You were tested to know if you would live by my words. Job, he was faithful. Hard stuff happened, and along the way, he knew he needed God. This is what you see again and again in the Bible. All these different kinds of stories happen, and the test in all of it is the people need God. In temptation, even if you fail in temptation, which you're going to, as we all do, we all give in at times, even then, the invitation is there. Even when you fail, you need God. Needing God won't make you perfect. Maybe you'll make less mistakes than you would. Either way, the testing and the temptation, both show us that we need God, and it shows us how faithful we are. And it gives us wisdom to see, I need to be more faithful in this area or that area. So this part of the prayer, again, I think it's very practical to real life. Like I think all of us, if I said, how often, are you tempted? Have you ever been tempted? All of us would raise our hands. And I think, are you tested? And you might say, well, I've never really thought about being tested in life versus school, but things about how the world works and how I work and maybe how I could grow and be stronger, or be more humble, or whatever that may be. It's this part of the prayer is very practical and very real life, and I hope that you see that if the words are testing or temptation, either way, we do need God's help, and that even though our needs maybe don't align with God, that part of this prayer is your kingdom come. Your will be done. Not my needs, God, but yours. And in the end, through a lot of life circumstances, I think you're going to come to the conclusion, we need the Father. And the Father already knows what we need. And He cares about us. He does take care of us. So hopefully, again, it's been a good challenge for me to think through this short little section of words. I mean, it's just a few words. And as I kept thinking and meditating on it, I thought, man, this is like, obviously we don't want to be tempted, but obviously we want life to be easier. That's not how it goes. So it's been, it's been challenging for me to think through these words in the text. And again, I hope that tonight has helped you think through it a little bit more and maybe put your own life in perspective a little bit more. And also kind of another good thing is everybody's dealing with hard stuff, and so people, hopefully you have a little more understanding and compassion for the people around you, because they're being tested and tempted as well. So I'll close us in prayer and then go to the next thing. Dear God, we are so thankful that you taught us a way to pray, and that that you have our needs in mind, and all the time. That what we need is at the top of your mind, and sometimes God, your will is at the back of our mind because we're thinking about other things. Maybe we're thinking about ourselves, just distracted in life, not taking life seriously, whatever, God. But our needs are always at the front of your mind, and you're always working things for our good. So, like Jesus advises us to pray, we do pray that your kingdom will come, and your will be done, and that somehow your will happen in spite of our will. God, please provide for us every day just what we need. Help us not to be greedy. Help us not to get too worried about the next day, but just to trust that you are providing for today, because, again, you have our needs at the top of your mind. Help us to be forgiving and compassionate to others. Everybody's got stuff going on, and we know we got our own stuff going on. So please help us to be forgiving to others and be understanding of their stuff, their good stuff, their bad stuff. That help us to care about all of it, and to be compassionate in general, and to be encouraging for good things, and be giving compliments to others, God. And as we talked about tonight, help us when temptation comes. Help us when you test us. We're not perfect, and help us to be honest with ourselves when these things happen. Help us to be honest about our sin and our weakness. Help us to be honest about our faithfulness towards you, and to take the steps to grow, and to mature and become someone like Job. Help us, just help us when these hard things happen, God. We know that you can lead us out of it, and ultimately, God, we want to be delivered from evil. Thank you for these words. Thank you for this prayer, and help it to be a part of our life. In Jesus' name, amen.